The Lord be with you. Come, let us make all things right. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. The disciples told their story of what had happened on the road and how they had recognized Jesus at the breaking of bread. They were still talking about all this when Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." In a state of alarm and fright, they thought they were seeing a ghost. But he said, "Why are you so agitated, and why are these doubts rising in your hearts? Look at my hands and feet. Yes, it is I, indeed. Touch me and see for yourselves. A ghost has no flesh and bones, as you can see I have." And as he said this, he showed them his hands and feet. Their joy was so great that they still could not believe it, and they stood there dumbfounded. So he said to them, "Have you anything here to eat?" And they offered him a piece of grilled fish, which he took and ate before their eyes. Then he told them, "This is what I meant when I said, while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses and in the prophets and in the Psalms has to be fulfilled." He then opened their minds to understand the scriptures, and he said to them, "So you see how it is written that the Christ would suffer and on the third day rise from the dead, and that in his name repentance for the forgiveness of sins will be preached to all the nations beginning from Jerusalem. You are witnesses to this." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
So if you want, you can consider this Gospel as kind of a breaking point for the faith, for the spring up of faith, and for the mission of the disciples of Jesus, because there is a lot of rumors, a lot of gathering of information, there is a lot of stories about the resurrection of Jesus. Just before this, there has been, just like we heard in the Gospel of yesterday, the two disciples on the way to Emmaus. They had their own experience. The women who went to the tomb, they had their own experience. They said also, just at the end of the Gospel of yesterday, that Jesus had appeared to Simon. And they were all gathered in one place. All of them had come to meet, and they were sharing their stories. A lot of doubts, a lot of rumors. Nobody knows what to believe. Is it really Jesus? Because they all witnessed him. They all witnessed that he was crucified on the cross, and he died, and he was buried, and there was no life in him. So how comes these stories are coming up? And the main obstacle is that they do not really understand the scriptures. They do not really have understood or grasped what Jesus was telling them while he was still alive, that he was going to fulfill all prophecies. The law of Moses is going to fulfill all that is written in the Psalms. And they did not understand this. So all these doubts are still in their minds, and then Jesus appears. And that is when everything is cleared up. They all witnessed this. They all saw him. And at the beginning, they thought he was a ghost. They thought maybe they are just having some psychological problems. Maybe because when somebody dies and you love that person, maybe you start seeing that person in a dream, or you start having hallucinations about that person, maybe because of the close contact you have with that person. And that kind of thing happens when you are grieving somebody whom you love so much. But then Jesus wants to clear this up, because even at that moment they are feeling that they think that he's a ghost they are seeing. They think that it's not really him. And he wants to clear that up by showing them and telling them, "You can touch me, you can see me, you can feel me. And I want to eat it before you, so that you can know that it is not somebody else. It is not a ghost, but it is I." And then the gospel goes ahead to say that he opens the scriptures and makes them to understand that the Messiah was supposed to suffer and to do exactly what he had done. and therefore he proclaims himself as the Messiah. So what happens after this point? Now they have all witnessed, they have touched him, they have seen him. And the first letter of St. John, at the beginning of that first letter, John chapter 1 from verse 1, it says that we witnessed to him whom we saw, we touched, we felt, we heard him. All these things, the senses, we are all satisfied. And this becomes the springboard for witnessing. They are going to witness to the resurrection of Christ. They are even able, they are even courageous enough, and they believe so much that they are willing to offer their lives for what they have experienced, the experience of the resurrection. And this becomes an incentive for them to go out, because Jesus says, you are witnesses to these things. You have seen, you have touched, you have felt, you have seen him, you have heard him. All these become incentives for you to go out. You become witnesses of mine because you have experienced the risen Lord. So this becomes the basis for their preaching. We continue to hear from in the first reading, where Peter is talking to the crowds, talking to the people, and even after the healing of the leprous person, the person who was the beggar, who was leprous, then he says, we witnessed him, we saw him, we are witnesses to the resurrection. And that is why we preach with such confidence. We are ready to die for what we saw. And we are not ready to give up that which we have seen, that which we have witnessed. And this becomes the basis for their going out and preaching, because they saw and they experienced. What about us? We hear him every day in the scriptures. We touch him every day in the Eucharist. We witness him that is doing great things in our lives, the lives of those around us. What about us? We are also called by virtue of our baptism to be witnesses of his resurrection. Go out and say we have seen him, we have experienced him in the words, in the sacraments that we have received. We are also witnesses to these things. And therefore Jesus also sends us by the power of the resurrection to reach out to others as witnesses of his resurrection. Even though we did not see the Jesus, the historical Jesus, as he was 2022 years ago, even though we did not hear him speak directly to us, but we hear him every day. He is still alive to us today through the scriptures and through the breaking of the bread. So my dear brothers and sisters, it is not a mission for the 12. It is a mission for all of us by virtue of our baptism. We are supposed to be a light. As we light up the candles from the Easter candle, then we also become a light to others by our words and by our actions.